Hello viewers, interest rate inflation rate trade-off is a matter of discussion. In the midst of rising inflation rate and lower interest rate with falling GDP growth rate, RBI says it has its commitment for speedier economic growth through supply-side driven economic tools while keeping regulated lower interest rate for longer period. Here, the RBI's main problem is regulated lower interest rate for longer period in the midst of rising inflation and falling GDP growth rate. But regulated lower interest rate for longer period has made RBI's monetary policy ineffective in the midst of failed fiscal policy measures. That is why the regulated lower reverse repo rate of RBI at 3.35% for longer period has attracted massively foreign capital investors, their investments in stock market rather than distressed economic sector. And it has brought in Indian economy for huge foreign capital infusion, huge liquidity infusion, huge credit facility infusion in the midst of consumption demand crunch, rising global commodity prices, rising input costs, rising transportation costs, etc. And finally, it has brought in Indian economy the financial instability, financial crisis, market volatility, with the problem of regulated lower interest rate for longer period in the midst of rising inflation and falling GDP growth rate. In this situation, RBI's loose monetary policy, huge foreign capital infusion, huge liquidity infusion, huge credit facility infusion, huge monetary stimulus, lower interest rate, instead of providing relief for the distressed sector like industry, company, servicing, manufacturing, and other sectors. In this situation, the Indian economy had to suffer massively because in this situation, foreign capital investors have invested their capital in the stock market rather than in the distressed sector. It means in this situation, the economic sector had to suffer while the stock market has boomed and it has got better return in comparison to the stressed economic sector. And its result is rising asset prices, rising wholesale price index rate inflation. In this situation, the risk-averse banks are deterring in providing credit facilities to the needy investors out of fear of rising NPAs, out of fear of rising asset quality. and on the other hand, the potential investors who are desiring to expect to invest in the distressed economy sector have become reluctant to avail the available cheaper credit facilities, and in the midst of consumption demand crunch, rising global commodity prices, rising input costs, rising transportation costs, etc. And finally, the potential investors who are desiring to invest the above said distressed economic sector had withdrawn their investment plan, and it has brought financial crisis, financial crunch in the midst of consumption demand crunch and rising global commodity prices. Here, in the midst of these problems, Fed Reserve has hinted it may increase its interest rates. So, with the rise of Fed Reserve interest rate, the already distressed RBI's monetary policy will be thrown into deep distress. So, in the midst of failed fiscal policy measures, ineffective RBI's monetary policy, financial instability, financial crisis, consumption demand crunch, the Indian economy has been thrown into deep distress, where interest rate, inflation rate trade-off as a problem is standing at the doorstep of RBI to be solved at the earliest to save lurching Indian economy in the midst of deep economic quagmire. This is the situation of Indian economy. And in the midst of this financial situation is going to be worst. Consumption demand is lower one, and investors are fearing to invest in the potential sector, while banking sectors are fearing the rise of NPAs, where asset quality is rising, means poor asset quality is rising. And so it becomes a duty of RBI to come forward to solve the interest rate, inflation rate, trade-off problem at the earliest in the interest of distressed economic sector of India, where India is thinking or expecting more and more relief from government and RBI. Thanks a lot of thanks, my viewers.